Kelsey. This is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of my fancy booktube hats, and today I'm bringing you a Top 5 Wednesday video. In case you're unaware, Top 5 Wednesday is a Goodreads group originally created by Lainey from Ginger Reads Lainey and currently moderated by Sam from Thoughts on Tomes. There's a topic for every Wednesday where you can pick 5 books to recommend for that topic. And this week's topic for January 25th is favorite underrated books. Now, it can be hard to precisely pin down a book's underratedness. Of course, it depends a great deal on where you're looking. I think the best way to pick out favorite underrated books might be to thoughtfully spend time pondering your favorite books and thinking about which ones really deserve more attention in the circles you travel in. But I kind of cheated. I didn't want to spend that much time thinking about what books to put on this list, so I did the Goodreads feature thing where you sort your books by how many ratings they have on Goodreads, and I picked the top 5 from my red shelf that I had given 4 stars or higher. Actually, not higher, because it turned out that all of these are 4-star books. There were some exceptions, though. I did not include anything on this list that was A, shorter than novel length. Novellas and shorter fiction kind of skew to the lower number of ratings on Goodreads, and I wanted to focus on full-length books in this video. And 2, I did not include anything that was part of a series. There was a book that would have been on here, except that it was the 3rd book in a trilogy, the first 2 of which have many more ratings on Goodreads, and that felt like a cheat. So these 5 books I actually have in order from most ratings to fewest ratings. They are all under 600 ratings on Goodreads, and as I said, they are all books that I gave 4-star ratings, and they are all books that I have talked about elsewhere on my channel. So I'm going to be fairly concise here if I can and leave links to where you can see me talk about these books in greater detail. So number 5 here on the list is Mortal Fire by Elizabeth Knox with 591 ratings on Goodreads. This is a young adult fantasy novel set in an alternate 1959 New Zealand. It takes place in the same world as the author's Dream Hunter duet, which is a duology, but it takes place several decades later, and this is a standalone. I would say that a lot of the major plot elements of this book seem, on the surface level, really tropey for YA fantasy. It's about a girl named Canny who can see magic in things around her, and she goes on a road trip and ends up learning more about that magic, and there's also a romance. But I found the whole experience and style of this book fundamentally odd in a way that I have a really hard time putting my finger on. Because this week happens to be the week of Diversithon, I happen to be looking at books through the lens of diversity a little bit, because that's what I'm focusing on in my reading right now. So I'm going to mention that this book has a protagonist who is of Indigenous Pacific Islander heritage. The author, as far as I'm aware, does not share that heritage, so it's not own voices. So I feel I cannot comment on the quality of the representation, but that is in this book. The second book on this list is The Phoenix Dance by Calhoun with 528 Goodreads ratings. This is also a young adult fantasy novel, but this is a fairy tale retelling that takes place in a fantasy kingdom. It's a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses that focuses on the character of Phoenix, who becomes the apprentice to the shoemaker in that story. I know that some people may be seeking representation of mental illness to diversify their reading, and this is, in addition to being a YA retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, an own voices book about bipolar disorder. This was a book that I read when I was a teenager and really liked. Calhoun was one of my favorite authors for a period of time when I was younger, but unfortunately, like many of Calhoun's books, this is out of print and it's also not available as an ebook. But if you do want to get your hands on a copy of this, it is available inexpensively extensively used on the Amazon Marketplace. Number 3 is a book that I've ended up featuring in several videos recently. It is The Omnibus of Digger by Ursula, Vernon. This is a graphic novel that was originally published as a webcomic. The Omnibus currently has 385 ratings on Goodreads. This is probably lower than the number of people who've actually read this because it is still available for free in webcomic form, and it was also published in several volumes. But I'm gonna go with it though because I think this still probably counts as underrated no matter how you count it. This is funny, poignant, epic, anthropomorphic animal fiction. It's a fantasy adventure story starring a wombat named Digger who wanted absolutely nothing to do with any of this nonsense, thank you very much. Again, I will link places where you can hear me talk more about all of these books in greater detail. Number 2, and we're getting much further into unknown book territory here, is Lifelode by Jo Walton. This has 233 ratings on Goodreads. Jo Walton is far from an unknown or underrated author, at least in the corners of the book internet that I frequent, but almost no one has read Lifelode, and I credit that to the fact that this is a harder book to find than all of her others. It comes from a small publisher, whereas most of her other books are published by Tor. This is definitely a slower, more thoughtful book to be read for ideas as opposed to entertainment. It definitely feels like a mature type of fantasy novel in that I felt when I had finished reading it like I would probably get more out of it if I went back and reread it, you know, when I'm several decades older than I am now, with more life experience behind me. It's about time and history and family and love and gods and religion and that sort of thing. If you're familiar with Jo Walton's work, that list of themes probably won't come as a surprise to you. It takes place in a really unusual fantasy world, and it also features non-traditional family structures. It centers on a family with 4 adults who also have romantic interests outside of the family. So if you're looking for that sort of exploration of family structures and sexual relationships, this would be a book that you could pick up. Then last on my list here, my number 1 book with the fewest ratings is The Mountain of Kept Memory by Rachel Neumeier with 82 ratings on Goodreads. Of course, this is a recent release, so people haven't had time to read this yet, but I feel like really no one has read this book. I read this ARC copy and I did a double review where one of the 2 books was this one, so I will link that review video. I think when I last checked on Goodreads, this had less than 1 page of actual written reviews, and some of the top ones were DNF reviews. So I feel like this might be a book that just failed to get any release hype. It's a standalone fantasy that may take place in a far future regressed society, or perhaps it's a fantasy world that has a high-tech past. It focuses on 2 characters, a prince and a princess of a kingdom called Karestind, and I loved the characters for their intelligence, and I enjoyed the story for its twists and turns. The thing that primarily bothers me about the fact that I haven't seen other reviews that I trust of this book is that in the wake over a lot of the recent discussions that have been happening concerning racism in fantasy world building, with books like Carve the Mark that are getting a lot of attention, it left me wondering if there are some things in this book that might have some similar problems, but I am a white girl and I cannot tell, and no one else is reading this book. And I don't want this book to be problematic because I enjoyed it so much and I'm still emotionally invested in it even a month after reading it. And maybe it isn't problematic, but I feel like I'll never know if no one else reads this book. Hello, has anyone read this book? I'd say that most of the story elements and themes of the book are more intelligently handled than you would see in your average young adult novel. Neumeier does write young adult, but this is an adult book. But all that to say, I liked it, and if you have read it, or if you plan to read it, or if you have any opinions on it, I want to hear from you. So these were my top 5 underrated books for this Wednesday. If you'd like to chat with me about any of these books, feel free to leave a comment. If you have any favorite underrated books that you think I might like, please let me know as well. As always, I hope you're having a nice day. Bye for now.